JC, if you could get my computer from my desk.
Hey, good evening, everyone. We're going to give it a few minutes, let a few more people jump on. We got a little late start. Let's see, we got more people coming on pretty quick. I got to share it around. I forgot to do that. Get out my phone and. All right, let's see. Good evening, Perry. Perry Lawrence. Oh, Coda Stewart's actually on time.
Wow.
Man. All right, let me share this around, get some more people on. All right, let's see. So Jason Beyer was supposed to join us tonight. He's not feeling well. He probably just didn't want to hang out with us.
You know? Yeah, he heard I was going to be here.
Yeah. Good evening, Charlie. Let's see. I got a few more groups I'm going to share this with. Oh, we got 15 people on right now, so it's coming up. Perry said he did a mock track with his wiener today. How'd it go, Perry? Let's see. It was just a few. We got people jumping on. See how this goes. All right. So Perry said he did 50 yards. All right, everyone. So put my phone up. I got done sharing that around. I'll need it in a few minutes, so I got to reference some stuff. So today we have Travis Bozeman with us. And Travis, where are we at today?
So here in Crawfordville, Florida, in a new feed store my wife just opened up, so we're just kind of getting going. 93-year-old building we renovated, didn't want to tear down, so we turned it into a feed store. And Kenny said, "Hey, let's come film down there." So that's what we're doing today. Going to hang out, enjoy the rocking chairs a little bit, and different scenery here, and and talk about dogs.
Yeah, this is where I get my feed from. And actually, Branson said he had to get some from you. He called me on the way here.
I think he's coming tomorrow. So yeah, it's good. We got a lot of stuff going on. Just trying to add something more to our community here, and something that's a better alternative than just the big box store where you buy feed that's who knows how old and how fresh.
That's right. Yeah, and you guys have it.
Yeah,
that's a big thing. The feed that we get from you, I can get locally if they keep it in stock, but it's hit or miss. And you can order it online, but you don't know how long it's been sitting in that warehouse where you guys are making sure you're providing fresh product. And I know I appreciate that, and the dogs appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. We've been trying to communicate with our. We're going to keep a little bit of everything, but our regular customers too, try to figure out what their feed cycle is. So we kind of always got fresh stuff, and it's not, a truckload of it coming in and sitting for 2 months. Instead, we know roughly how much you feed now. We can order it and have it here the week before you're ready to get it. And and same thing with the rest of our regulars, just trying to make sure that we've got what they need.
Yeah. And, feed's a big thing. And I know you said that you and your wife had learned a lot when you started researching what feed you were going to carry.
Right.
And that's something the last couple seminars we had, the vet touched on was feed. And, you know, everything you read, or I shouldn't say everything, a lot of stuff you read, oh, grain free this, grain free that. And then, you know, the vet speaks at the seminar, says, do not feed grain free.
Yeah, unless you absolutely have to, unless there's a medical reason.
Right, an allergy.
Right, then yeah, why not feed something more natural?
Right. So, so Travis, tell us a little bit about yourself.
We got somebody pulling up. We may have to get somebody.
Oh boy,
somebody to let them know that we're closed for the day. Yeah, so I grew up here in Wakulla County, Florida, just south of Tallahassee, and had deerhounds most of my young life, and went off into the military, and there, you know, I couldn't get away from the hounds or the dogs, so I trained retrievers for a little bit at a high level, did some field trials, had some foxhounds.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be right back. Just one second.
Okay, cool. That's cool. Are y'all just a feed store or what?
Hey guys, sorry about that. He had a customer show up. They're actually closed, but he's going to go ahead and take care of them for whatever they need, and then we'll continue with it, you know, him telling us a little bit about himself. And you know, we got some exciting news to share tonight. We have 2 new events on the books. Another one we're working on, and when he gets back in, we'll touch more on that later. But we've added a couple of states and events, and got a lot going on. So.
Turn the open sign off.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, his open sign was blinking, so we got that corrected.
No, that's good. We've been here for a week, so we still have people stopping by. You don't ever want to turn them away.
No, take care of your customers. So you were saying you were Wakulla County?
Yeah. So I trained retrievers for a little while. Got some experience with that, and then after the military, after the Marine Corps, I moved back. One of my buddies was into foxhounds, so we did some foxhounds for a while. You know, when I was younger and I had my deerhounds, I had one that would blood trail just because she did. You know, some of them just have these natural things, and of course, she would run deer too. But you put her on a lead, and she'd stay on a blood trail. So we did some blood trailing, but it wasn't the same. I mean, you're talking about back in the '90s. You know, we didn't have the cell phones, and I heard Randy Vick talking at one of the events not long ago about that era when you carried a pager around, or he did. I didn't carry a pager for trailing, you know, it was my buddies, but you know, that type of thing. So it was a whole different game back then, and it wasn't as connected as we are now, and it wasn't as specialized. Right. So I guess it's been about 6 or 7 years ago. I got the itch for a cur dog when you had Xena, and I got the pleasure to work her on a couple of different tracks. Luckily, you had surgery at the time, so I got to go find deer with her a couple of times, and from the time I did that, I knew that that's what I wanted, but I also knew the type of breed she was, and I wasn't in a place where I could have a dog like that, and I didn't have a place where she could run and get the exercise, and so it took me about 6 or 7 years, and I finally got one, and I've been training her for that. So as far as being specialized in blood trailing, you know, I'm fairly new to this deal. I've been around all types of dogs, and I think my varied background has helped me with her training, because I wanted to do her training. I've trained all my other dogs.
Right.
And so it's been a lot of fun. But it's really neat to see how the disciplines all cross over too. There's similarities, and then there's other things that are completely specific. Honestly, I'm learning more about the deer side of it. I've been a deer hunter my whole life, but the glands and the scents and the behaviors and all those things, you know, you can train dogs all day long, but the handler's got to be a big part of it.
That's right. And, you know, another thing, and you probably see this, the more deer you track, the more you learn about deer.
Sure.
But the problem is, the more you track, the less you hunt. So that information you're learning doesn't help you too much. I mean,
right.
I tell everyone, you know, you see online, oh, a wounded deer is going to go to water. Wounded deer is going to get back to where it's comfortable. It's heading to its bedding area. There may be water along the way, and it may stop. It may try to soothe that wound, but they're wanting to get back where they feel safe.
Yeah, I mean, how many times, even before we were tracking, you shoot a deer and you know their tendency quite regular is to end up back the way it was coming from. So a lot of times you shoot a deer and it's facing one way and it runs that way, but don't ever be surprised that it's not going to turn around and go right back where it was coming from, because you're right, that's where it feels safe, or that's where it was just at, or
Yep.
or whatever. I had a guy this year tell me that that a wounded deer won't run uphill. You know, we weren't finding any sign anywhere else, and my dog started going up the hill, and he said, "Well, it can't go that way. A wounded deer won't run uphill." I'm not the kind of person that'll argue with him, so instead I just said, "Well, let's just see what the dog does, and we'll figure it out from there." You know?
Yep, and that's the best response. That's what I tell them. Hey, maybe it didn't go that way, but let the dog get it out of its system. We can always come back and go the other direction.
Right.
You know, it's that new trackers. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes they make, is listening to the hunters too much. Just make them feel comfortable, but know that your dog's going to go the right way. And if you put the time in training, in learning your dog. Hey, yeah. Ralph just jumped on. Jeff Rittenauer says, we need an event closer to Tallahassee so I can attend another one. We actually have plans for that. So that will be coming. So although you said you're fairly new to tracking, I mean, it's obviously you're a woodsman, you're a houndsman. It's like you said, a lot of it transitions over. There is some specialized stuff, but let's see. Is it frozen for anyone else? Oh, let's see. Oh, listening in, good conversation. I guess Chris must be having some signal issues or something.
It's probably that South Georgia internet.
Yeah, or the South Georgia mindset, just slow and taking it easy. So I was telling them, when you stepped outside, we got some exciting news. We've got 2 new events that we just got on the books today. Let me pull it up. We have, I guess you'd say, not the soonest one, because the soonest one is the first weekend of May in Alabama, right. And then the next weekend we have in North Mississippi. We have just added an event in Pennsylvania. It is in the town of Clearfield, Pennsylvania. And we will be there May 31st through June 2nd. So that'll be a good event. There's a lot of trackers in that area, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, that have all been reaching out, requesting an event. So that's going to be a good one. And then let's see, we have Iowa. Let me double check the dates there.
Seems like we get a lot of participation on here from Iowa. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's and actually, right, you seen in the parking lot, I was on the phone. Ralph and I was on the phone with Jeff Still working out the details, and he shared with us. So it's that one's going to be weekend of September 7th and 8th. He reached out to some people and made a post, and within 24 hours, he had 17 people committed to test. So that's awesome.
I know they do a lot of bird hunting, pheasant hunting, and stuff like that. So I wonder if the crossover there is just the willingness, the acceptance to dogs and game. That mix. I know some states are tough because they don't mix that mindset, but I wonder if that has anything to do with it.
Well, I can tell you, Iowa, they recently got their tracking rights, and it was tough for them. They had I think it was by one vote, if I remember right, and that person was on the fence, and they swung towards allowing use of dogs. And it's important that the community there gets the education, and that they get the support to continue to be able to keep doing what we're doing, because ultimately we're out there not just helping hunters but helping conservation.
I was going to say, I know you guys keep talking about it, but it's a huge conservation thing. I was actually talking to Jason Beyer earlier today, and he was talking to a family member, and his family member said, well, I don't know, we shoot straight here where I live, so we don't need trackers. And he said, well, how many times have you not found a deer? And he's like, well, that happens sometimes. And Jason said, well, that's why you need trackers.
Yeah.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are the ones we find.
Yep.
So yeah, we don't find the ones that drop right there. You don't need to call us, but
nope.
But
we don't mind if you do.
Especially when we have young dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, so I think it's just that mindset changing. People say, oh, I see it all the time on the different Facebook groups, and it's funny. There's somebody in the group bad mouthing people about the way they shoot, but 20 years ago, think about how many deer just went off and died.
Yeah, and we hear all the time, oh, it just seems like the popularity of tracking has taken off, and now everyone just wants to call a tracker. They're just taking marginal shots. No, social media has taken off, and social media has shed light on just how many deer have been lost over the years.
Yeah.
And that's the part that people doesn't realize. For those of us that tracked before the big boom, we still got just as many calls.
Oh, I remember, back in the days when, like I said, when you had Xena and you were running around, and I just remember thinking to myself, I don't know when this guy sleeps. It's like you'd be out on a regular basis till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and then tracking the next day after the morning hunt. We were in the same hunting club, so I would see it from from a distance. But yeah, for sure.
Well, just recently, there was some people questioning my integrity as far as how many deer I track and recovered over the years, because I had to submit it for an application for something, and they didn't even come to me and ask me, but they questioned it and said, well, I just don't see how that's possible. But they came to me. I had the documentation. I have the references. Just like you said, you saw it. Man, those days of me doing that are probably over. Sleeping in Walmart parking lots on the side of the road. My wife and I, we were asleep on the side of the road and have a cop come knock on the window to see if we're all right. Just because we were so tired, I had to stop, or I wasn't going to make it home.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that anymore. And luckily, I say luckily, there's enough trackers now. There's more to go around, but it seems like we're still just as busy, because now the exposure to more hunters.
Right.
And, in our area, of course, North Florida, we're being inundated with people coming up from South Florida hunting because they've overdeveloped and they have nowhere to hunt.
Right.
So, and then COVID hit, and just the outdoors, huntings became more popular, hunting, fishing, camping, kayaking. But, we're seeing a big influx of hunters here. And I know Georgia, South Georgia, Middle Georgia,
sure.
All the South Florida people are moving up trying to find somewhere to hunt. And, I got a call the other night from a guy wanting us to train 2 labs. Well, he lives in New York City, and he just bought some land in central Georgia. He's going to offer hunts, but he's only promoting it in New York City because there's so many people there that wants a place to hunt and they want to go somewhere. And so he's catering to them. So it's, although they say hunting's on the decline, we are seeing some new people getting out into the woods, and that's what we need to do. And that's what we're here for, not just tracking deer, but helping the hunting community and promoting the hunting community and the tracking community. Because without hunters, we don't have deer to track.
That's right. I know there's a lot of the tracking community that volunteers at youth hunts and veteran hunts, but especially those youth hunts, where I know Chuck on Florida Hunters Network. I know he's involved in the youth hunt program and does a lot of those. So, that's real important. I know there's several trackers that go out and volunteer just for those hunts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we've been talking, Jason Beyer and I have been talking about having a youth weekend in the summer and get some youth to come out and teach them how to handle the dogs and track. And, so we're looking at getting the youth more involved that way. My my boys, I'm getting them more involved. Dakota, you know, he was at the Louisiana event, helped judge and helped lay the lines with Paul. And, you know, he's been out there working with John every day training dogs. He's been training his own dogs all by himself, him and his brother, you know, with no really very little direction. I mean, he might ask me a question here or there, but he's going out there laying the lines and he's letting them lay. And, you know, based on what the dog does, he's extending that time all on his own. I mean, of course, he grew up seeing me do this. But,
sure. I mean, it's good for the kids.
Oh yeah.
Josie accidentally bought her tracking dog a couple weeks ago. So she's got one now. She's got a 4-month-old puppy that she's getting ready to start training, and that's going to be hers. She's going to train it and test it, and you know, of course, I'll help. I'll lay lines. I'll do whatever we need to do. But that's her deal. So
you're gonna run some tests for the dog? She's behind the camera, hiding, being shy. Yeah, she accidentally, on purpose, bit on the dog. So, we've got a couple of comments here. Don Clark, he says, deer do what deer do. If we knew what they would do, we wouldn't need dogs. Always trust the dog. That's right.
Yep.
That is right. Okay, we'll get to this one from Glenn Martin. All right, Glenn says, looking forward to the Iowa seminar. I'm UBT2 with my dog. What makes the ABTA better or just different institutions? I wouldn't say we're better. I feel our standards are a little higher as far as consistency. And I would say we have more focus on some handler and ethical practices. Wouldn't you say? I mean,
yeah, I think you hit kind of the three main focuses, right? You know, there's consistency. If you go look at, and absolutely, I wouldn't say, I think both organizations have great merit, and they're both here for a good reason. So to talk bad about either one or any of them, you know, I don't think there's really any reason to. I think UBT, you know, is great in what they do, but, you know, so if you look at their standards, though, they have minimum standards for their tests, but, you know, there's not a maximum. Of course, there's kind of an implied maximum, but it's not written. So right. ABTA's got the maximum, you know, it's this many hours to this many hours. It's not open-ended.
And then this distance to this distance.
Correct.
You know, and probably I would say the biggest difference is that's a big difference, but probably to me, the biggest difference is that handler side.
100%. Well, yeah, because if I'm tracking a deer, for example, my dog, you know, she'll take a mock track all day long. She'll run the mock track. But if she's tracking off lead and she's 120 yards in front of us and she finds that hide, she's found enough deer at this point in her young life that she finds a hide and she's found it. And she's like, okay, I found this. I'm off to the next one. So she'll leave it sometimes before we get there. So here it's, you know, it's a team. If I'm following her line, she's already been there, and by the time we clear the bushes and I see that recovery and I can make the recovery, if she's over here 50 yards away, just checking to see if there's something else, you know, I'm not penalized. Whereas, you know, that is one thing there. It's more, I think, the dog, it's not the team atmosphere. That dog has to, in front of the judge, indicate the recovery. And either side, like I said, I wouldn't talk bad about either one, but we're out there to recover the deer as a team.
No, and I will say the difference between judges within the UBT organization varies as well.
Sure.
I mean, and so there, I guess you'd say, inconsistencies there. I'm not going to say it's good or bad, because I like a lot of the judges, and I can see viewpoints from ones that are more lenient in some areas and more strict in other areas. But as a whole, that's not consistent. And I know they've been working on that. I'm not here to bash them. That's just.
And I know you still certify dogs with UPT client dogs or whatever. I just went to a UBT event and certified, and I had a great judge, and I didn't have any issues. I think it's a good organization. And I think anytime we can add another organization with equal or you know, equal merits, I think why not? You know, we have You did mention the ethics there. There's a big part in there too. And when we talk about it, it's real simple, but indicating private property or posted signs
Yep.
As part of our tests. And that might seem trivial, but it's a real big deal to make sure that our handlers are aware and cognizant and considerate of other people's property.
Right. And then when you get into the season level test, being able to demonstrate that you can read the signs of the hit site and the wound beds and give some wait times or strategies, that's another huge thing, because something we're seeing more and more of is teams just going out there and just, especially here in the Southeast, where a lot of these places are allowed to track, people are allowed to track off lead. And young trackers are the worst about it. Oh, I'm just going to go and we'll try to catch the deer. Well, I can tell you, I've had some good catch dogs. You know that. Bay dogs, catch dogs. When I started waiting, my numbers started climbing.
Yeah, and a lot of times the hunter can't give you that. It's always good blood, or it's always lung blood, or a lot of times they can't read that, and they're the hunter, and it's no fault to them. But you get there on site and you see something a little bit different, and it's good to be able to interpret that. But like you said, there's no lack of tracks either. So there's these guys that are getting going, and it's a Saturday evening, and they've got 5 more tracks lined up, and they're like, hey, let's just dump them and see what happens. When maybe they should say, hey, Mr. Hunter, let's get back on this one at 8:00 tomorrow morning. This is what I see.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to put down any other organization, because I've been a UBT member for a long time. I was a UBT apprentice judge for a long time. And we saw some areas that we wanted to do things a little different. We had some legislative stuff come up, and we needed to have some representation. That was a big factor, right? I mean, one of the biggest factors. And I will say, it's no secret, people seen it. There's been some controversy back and forth, I guess you'd say, with the UBT when they sent out a letter. I will say, and I'll give a lot of the credit to Marlowe. We have been talking with the UBT the last couple of weeks with Marlowe and Andy Bensing, and I'm not going to say it's a perfect working relationship, but it's improving. A lot of it was just like anything else. Just needed some communication. They needed to know what direction we were headed in, and where our mindset was, and and a lot of rumors got around, and so we're clearing the air, and that tension's not as prevalent as it was. But still, like I said, we do have differences, and that's going to be in consistency, the ethics. The real life scenarios, like the scent challenges, the scent pull.
You got grid searches. I mean,
grid searches, other dogs. Yeah, our finish test. That's a big one. So our finish test is it's the real deal. All of them are very realistic, and Alex Hood chimed in and said as real life as possible. I mean, like our finish test, we don't tell you where the hit site is. We give you a 30-yard area and say it was somewhere in here, and you got to find it with your dog, line it out. Well, not only do we not tell you where the hit site is, it's been grid searched. It's had another dog on it searching. It has a scent gap to work through. It has other animal scent challenges to work through. I mean, and all the terrain challenges and environmental challenges. And UBT has their UBT3, and they do some of that. There's some game playing there. It's a fun test. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you got to witness one the other weekend.
Yeah. No, and I know Perry's on here. I think he had fun on his test.
Oh,
I wouldn't say with UBT or and ABTA it's an either or. I mean, honestly, as a handler, I think it could be a both thing. Why not support two good organizations? Just like a lot of us are maybe NRA members or whatever.
Right.
Look at those organizations and I don't think it's a pick sides, but say, hey, let's support both of these. You got twice as many opportunities to work and test your dog. You
Yep.
got
and different judges, different viewpoints that give
different feedback.
Yeah.
So honestly, I think there's room for both. And then when you get to the part where you like you said, you guys are really looking at getting in front of legislation that hurts our sport in a positive direction though.
Right.
What can we do within the sport to promote good ethics and to promote conservation and those things in order to get in front of the antis that are out there that are trying to kill the sport because they don't really know.
Right.
And I think when it comes down to it, you're probably going to find that both organizations are probably going to have to both fight some of that.
Oh, yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a kill either one. I think it's support the sport in general.
Well, Andy Bensing said and Marlo, they both said on the phone that they can see the possibility of working together in the future. Which was our goal to begin with, but I do understand their viewpoint.
Sure.
So I don't want to beat a dead horse with this, but the biggest thing is you're going to see some differences. You're going to gain from both.
Yep.
Like I said, there's a lot of great judges in the UBT. And honestly, the UBT has paved the way in a lot of aspects in our tracking community, and I can't take anything from them for that. I appreciate it. And I test them both.
That's the same thing. So,
but one of the biggest challenges that I'm facing is we don't have any judges near us.
Right.
I was going up to North Georgia but now that judge has had some stuff come up in his life, and he's having to take a step back.
Yeah, so I was talking to another tracker today. I think we got to go to Alabama now I don't know. Where's
for UBT?
Yeah.
There's no judges in Alabama.
Okay.
So Mississippi, Louisiana. Okay. I contacted one in South Carolina. Didn't get any. I tried several. Mississippi, couldn't get anyone. So I'm driving to Louisiana, almost to Texas. 10 hours, 10.5 hour drive. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to support them, So that's a lot of it there,
Yeah. So we offer private testing so you're not having to wait for an event. So for started and season levels, we offer that private testing.
Hang on, you brighten it up. Sun's going down.
Yeah, no, you're good. So as we build that judge base, and have more judges, in different places in the country. I know you were just talking about the different events. Those are huge, not only for the purpose of the event, but to help build that judging base.
Yeah. So we just had some people apply to be judges and actually working on it. I think there's 4 in Alabama, if I remember. Actually, one had some work stuff come up, so that he's going to be delayed now. So 1, 2, 3 for sure in Alabama, 1 in Arkansas. Looks like we're gonna have 1 in Missouri, a couple in Iowa. We have a certified judge in Michigan. We've had someone else reach out there. And then we've had a couple reach out, West Virginia, Ohio. We got someone that's in the process there, almost finished with the process in Ohio. Pennsylvania, we had a couple reach out. Maryland. So right now we have judges in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, Michigan. So it's growing.
Yeah.
It's growing fast. Seems like every day we have more and more, and our membership is growing tremendously.
And I know Carrie's working her butt off with all those judge applicants
Oh, yeah.
and the criteria and all that. And so messages every day from her on those. So
Yeah.
she's staying busy on the judge side for sure.
I just got a text a few minutes ago. Working on it right now. We with 2 people in Alabama that are right there. So that's exciting stuff. So kind of slow with the Oh, here's one. Let's see. Cassidy Long says, love working with the youth and women's hunt with NWTF. And she just made an announcement. I'm starting a NWTF chapter in her. She's doing this in her county and hoping that she can get a few kids in the woods.
Nice.
That is great. And I can say how all that started. There was a tracker years ago, which is actually how I got it, my first Ladner cur. And he lived over there near where the Longs live. Well, his dog's name was Chief. And I followed that dog. And, my friend Dustin Williams, I had a bloodhound at the time. And Dustin said, hey, man, you've been watching that Ladner cur? I said, yeah. He said, I think I might get one. He never did, but I did. I said, yeah, I'm going to get one. And actually, I called Randy Vick whenever I was thinking about adding another dog. And I said, what do you think? He said, yeah, I've been watching that Chief. Well, the tracker's name was Josh Kelsey. He ended up getting into a car accident and passed away. And anyways, he tracked for the NWTF over there, one of their gobbler events. And when that happened, they contacted me and said, well, actually, I put them in touch with Josh. And then that happened. They reached back out, said, what do we do? Who do you recommend? And James and Kim Long started going there. Well, now Cassidy is going there tracking. So
right.
And now she's starting her own chapter. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, just goes to show what all transpires just from staring at a dog's butt.
Right.
So yeah, how many tracks did you end up going on this year?
I think I was somewhere in the low 40s.
I know you got started late. You reached out to me a bunch, and we just didn't have any tracks. That hurricane hurt us.
Yeah, the hurricane hurt real bad. Everybody east of us, those your whole area, Perry and Mayo, those are normally wide open, and this year is just nothing. I think it was literally was it right before bow season, or is like the weekend before or the weekend of bow season or something was when the hurricane hit?
Right before.
I remember because everybody was ready to hunt, and then everything got wiped out.
Yeah, all of my stands were gone, and it was rough.
But yeah, I know I was reaching out to everybody. 2 or 3 hours west. I reached out to several of the folks up in South Georgia and kind of all over, but nobody knew me, and except for we knew each other.
I had to do some rallying for you.
But yeah, I finally was like, hey Kenny, I know none of these folks know me, and so as an ethical hunter and as a like I said, I've had dogs and I trusted my dog, I trained my dog, but I also didn't want to take this young dog that was unproven and go out on to a hunter and be their only hope, when I could team up with somebody and go with a more proven dog or a seasoned team. So kind of that was my challenge. Is I didn't want to just dive right in there and try to go out and do my own thing right off. And then maybe not end up with the results. But I ended up finally kind of got in with a group of folks here. We've got about 5 of us that constantly are. We talk almost every day.
Constantly taking all the tracks that I used to.
Well, you're welcome to come with us anytime you want. So I'll let you come on your tracks, no problem. But yeah, so I think we ended up with about I ended up on probably about 40 this year, and quite a bit of that toward the end of hunting season.
And you got to work with quite a few different people, different breeds of dogs, and you started judging with us, and how much benefit have you seen from testing as far as for you?
From which standpoint? I'll tell you my biggest standpoint is from judging other people's dogs. I've learned to handle and read my dog significantly better.
Yep.
So we tested, I guess it was a week and a half ago for, like I said, we were talking about, we went to a UBT event and tested. And I hadn't run a lot of mock tracks since hunting season, I think maybe 2. And we went out there and tested, and there were things that I was able to read and pick up on. Both of the 90s on my test line, my dog went slightly over, and I was able to read her. We were on lead, so it wasn't a big deal. But both of them, I was literally standing on the 90 when I worked her back to me. So within 25 feet, and I could read her pretty good before then. But watching other people's dogs in that quantity and that amount, working tracks, and then watching the handlers.
Yeah.
And watching what the handlers are doing. And as a judge, you want to help so bad, but it's like, well, we'll save that feedback to the end.
Yeah. I gotta bite my tongue so much because I'm like, golly, I just want to. But Mike Alguire's finish test. I mean, I'm like, come on, man. I was getting frustrated. I'm like, I know you got to see this, Mike. I know, and I know we talk about him all the time, but it was like, man, I know what this dog's doing. It's like
he's handled his dogs on hundreds of tracks, and his dog went on, I don't know how many. I guarantee you over 100 tracks this year, probably double that. I don't know, but the combination of the two, and of course it got in his head at the very beginning, and he was, that was the problem is he was in his own head.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, even watching other. I mean, I watched a couple of outstanding dogs this year on or judged. I judged a couple of outstanding dogs this year that the hunter or the handler was messing them up.
Oh yeah,
pulling them off of it, and
yeah.
It's like, and you can't say anything, but it's like, man, your dog's right.
Yeah,
I
see that a lot. And the more you judge, the more you learn. Like certain types of leads cost people a test sometimes. Probably the biggest one I see is those flat biothane leads.
I like mine. I
know you do, but the more you judge, the more you see how they'll cinch down on vines. They'll cinch down around, that stiff rock climbing rope. It doesn't cinch down tight like that, and it'll slip through. Some dogs, that makes a difference.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
You get a little bit of tension against them, and they just shut down, or they think you're trying to correct them. And I see it. I've seen it a lot with those flat biothane.
Yeah. And some dogs, every dog's different, but some dogs, if you correct them one time off of that line, in their mind, they're not supposed to go there. And it's real hard to get them to go back there.
Right.
And especially if you're a handler and don't know where it's at. You've just corrected them off of that line. So now they're hesitant to go back over there. And you can't help them because you don't know where it is. So you're right. That correction is a big deal, or lack of correction, accidental correction.
Yep. Another that made me think about another difference between our test is like UBT. You get off the line, the judge brings you back and reattaches you to that line.
Right.
We don't. It's like real world. Better pay attention to the sign. You better pay attention to reading your dog. If you see a spot of blood, you better mark it.
Yep.
Because if you get off the line, you get called back. You need to find your way back to where you feel like the dog was on the line, whether it's a wound bed, whether it's a spot of blood that you saw. But that's more real life. I mean, You don't have someone to in the real world. If you go out there with a hunter that never seen a dog before, they're not going to tell you, hey, you're off the line, you need to come back, and tell you where to come back to. I mean, That's not realistic. I mean, but I get it. But it's like I was talking to someone else the other day. Tracking has evolved over the years. Years and years ago, that UBT one was something.
Oh, I remember the first time that I found a deer. This was back in the late 90s, but I found a deer that was, I think it was like 18 hours old, and I thought that was a big deal.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Now it's pretty regular.
Now 18 hours. I mean, even with a young dog, oh well. You know,
Yeah.
now I mean, scent conditions, they could play a big role. You know, if you're out in the middle of something wide open and the sun beats on it and the wind's blowing all day and it's sandy, that's a lot different than, you know, covered canopy where it's cool and, you know, thermals are settling and all those things. But but yeah, you're right. It's evolved, and our ability to know or think we know better what the dog's capabilities are is evolving, and it will, just like anything else. The more we do it.
Well, I had someone ask me, asking about callbacks. What happens if my dog is 20 yards off tracking and paralleling the line? Well, that's fine. We know that happens. I mean, many times I have tracked deer and the blood be 15 yards away, and my dog is locked in on a beeline, and I'm down the hill, and the blood, the blood trail is up here, and I'm down here with the dog, and we're trailing perfectly parallel. And the hunter keeps saying, "Well, the blood's up here, your dog's off." I'm like, "Hey, I'm gonna follow my dog," and leads right to it.
Right.
Thermals is something that people doesn't talk about a lot, and a lot of it's because they don't understand thermals.
Sure.
Thermals play a huge role in what we do. Got a comment from Wayne Reese. He said, Travis did a great job as judge, gave great feedback, and helped with the dog read that I missed.
He was one of the ones I was talking about. He's got an outstanding young dog. Super cool to watch. Really, really nice. And it's a Jack Russell. You don't see a lot of Jack Russells out there tracking. I don't see a lot of Jack Russells out there tracking, but that one can do it all day long. He's cool.
You know where they use Jack Russells a lot? It's Africa. You'll see it now if you'll pay attention and watch some of these hunting shows in Africa. A lot of them use Jack Russells to track with.
It's that energy that I can't get past. And he even told me, he's like, look, I need to get the first, 100 yards out of the system and get him settled down, and then we're good. Yeah. And he was right. It took him a while to get settled down. But, again, that's a good handler knowing his dog. You got to know.
Yeah, he and I, we've been back and forth trying to get up with one another. I've just been swamped, and I got to get up with him and get him and John connected, if nothing else. So got to do that. Speaking of that, the many different breeds, I know you've came over to my house and you've seen us work many different breeds and many different levels of dogs. And, I know you've came over when a dog that we're bragging on just bombs it. That's something else people don't realize. It happens.
Yeah. They have bad days.
You may have a jam up dog, and then one day it just has a bad day. That's one reason why I have multiple dogs. Instead of always, and that was because years ago we didn't have a lot of people to call to back us up.
Right.
It was me and Randy, and both of us were spread thin. And so I was like, I gotta have other dogs. And the year I got Xena, my bloodhound got sick. I couldn't track with him. So I spent that first. She was 6 months old at the start of the season. I didn't have a choice.
Well, and they all have. I mean, the first year I got to find with Xena was behind Dustin's dog, who was he was a great dog.
Oh yeah.
He was proven and found many deer, and it wasn't his fault. He was having a bad night or was off or something had him messed up. And Dustin even knew it, though, as a handler. I think he called you.
Oh, yeah, he did.
He's like, something's not right. And then you called me and you said, hey, something wasn't right about that track. Let's go look in the morning.
Yep. So, and speaking of breeds, I mean, people used to look down on cur dogs. You bring a hog dog out here to track a deer, and then we start finding deer and more deer and more deer. They think if it's not a bloodhound and a bloodhound's nose, you can't find a deer, but it's just not the case.
Right.
I train enough dogs. I don't see the advantage of the nose of a bloodhound over many other breeds for what we do.
Yeah.
There's other things out there in the scent tracking world, human scent, and other work, search and rescue and all that, where maybe it does play a bigger factor, but I just don't see it in what we do. There's a lot of great breeds, and choose a breed that fits your lifestyle is what I tell everyone.
That long-haired dachshund that was in Stockton.
Yeah.
How many things does that one do?
Duck hunts, quail. Yeah, it retrieves ducks.
Hogs.
Yeah.
Retrieves ducks.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does it all, and that fits. That fits his lifestyle. That's his dog, and I agree. I mean, I've seen go to your kennels anytime, and if you've got 10 or 12 dogs out there, probably 8 different breeds out there at least.
Oh yeah. Yeah, right now we have Catahoulas, Labs, wire-haired dachshunds. What else we have there? My son's training. He's training a Walker Hound. It's doing really good. What else do we have there, Brandy? We got our dogs: Catahoulas, Black-mouthed Cur, wire-haired dachshund, Lab.
You've had some bird dogs out there too, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, for deer, but
yeah,
but the retriever type breeds, I think some of those.
Yeah, in fact, we've got a cocker. We've got a cocker spaniel that we're probably our personal dog that's trained for retrieving and flushing quail. Probably going to start training him to track.
Blue tick. Still got.
Oh yeah, the little blue tick went home, but we got another blue tick there that belongs to Kyle, which is probably on here watching tonight. That dog's doing really good. Blue ticks. Every blue tick we trained has really excelled.
I think some of them like the old mindset for the bloodhounds, and then some of these hounds, it is more ingrained in their genetics because of years and years of being a hunting type dog. But I think any of them can do it. It's training that into them and building that desire.
Yeah, and that's another thing is I was always the mindset, papers don't mean anything, and then you get into the retriever world.
They do,
especially field trial retrievers.
Well, and they don't mean everything, but it sure makes that training curve a lot less.
Yeah,
in instances,
right, and you get the right genetics, and it makes a world of difference. It really does. And I didn't realize it. No, I didn't realize it until I got into the retriever side, and so we got our Lab, and we paid probably $2,000 more as a pup than you would for the average Lab.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we got a lot of training in him, but that dog's a machine. I mean, the downside to that is that's all he wants to do is hunt. So let's see, we got Beagles. I call mine Beagle Hula. Beagle Hula. Yeah, we trained. We actually owned a Beagle. It belonged to John Vaughn, and then we traded out. John wanted a cur dog that I had, and we got a little Beagle, and that thing was a machine. It'd track anything you wanted to track. I mean, you put it on a dog, it'd track a dog. You put it on a person, it'd track a person, deer. And we ended up getting rid of it just because it didn't fit in my pack. It was a great dog. It just wasn't the right fit for us. And that guy got it, and he runs rabbits with it and tracks deer. Yeah.
I had a good family friend when I was a teenager that he actually tracked deer all over Florida, Georgia, Alabama with a dachshund. Back before that was a regular thing.
Yep.
But he bred his beagles with the dachshund because he wanted little short beagle type dogs that he could rabbit hunt and track deer with, and that's why.
Yeah. And the more you judge and you see all these different breeds come out, and there's always some that just constantly rise to the top. And especially with us training, we get dogs so many different breeds in, but you see certain dogs within breeds that excel, but then there's those breeds that are just seems like every one of them that comes in is just got it. And those wire-haired dachshunds, I'm not a little dog fan. as far as tracking and hunting. I'll admit it. I'm a cur dog man at heart, but I had to get one, and then two, and then three, and then four. They're just fun. They're fun to work with.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of advantages if that's your thing. There's a lot of advantages to them. Riding the truck all day long with you, go on a road trip out of state to go hunting and be there. That's that friend of mine. His dog never left the house without his dog there, and that was it. And he'd go hunting. The dog would curl up in the seat of his truck and be there when he got done. And if he shot a deer, he'd take the dog in and find his deer. So,
yeah, and these people that travel all over the country hunting and they want to take their own dog. What better
right.
dog to have to travel with?
Right.
I mean, I'm still a cur dog man. I mean, I still got my Ladner cur. I still got 3 Catahoulas, and then we got my wife's Corso. Yeah, we're adding another dog. Yep, we got a new dog coming on Saturday.
What's coming?
A Dogo.
Oh, goodness.
I won't hear the end of this one.
No, probably not.
In fact, the breeder called me on the way here. He says, "Well, how much crap did you hear after word got out?" But it got out to a very small group, and no one really said anything. But actually, I asked him. I said, "Hey, do you mind if I train this to track wounded hogs? Because we get a lot of people in our area, that comes from South Florida.
Yep.
And to us, if we shoot a hog and lose it, no big deal. There's so many of them. But these people coming up from South Florida, they want them.
Yeah.
Well, that just opens up year-round tracking for us. We still get to track year-round with some high fence and stuff. But
and I know a lot of people track with their cur dogs or whatever. John had a great dog that would track hogs quite a bit. But if you got a cur like mine that sleeps with my daughter and lives in the house, my wife's not letting me take that one out to find a hog. So I could definitely see the benefit there.
Well, not just that. I do everything I can to break my tracking dogs off of hogs. I don't want them trashing on a hog. That's a no-no. And does it happen? Sure. It happened this year. I mean, I didn't know it, but the guy tells me after we already got into the hog, says, "Oh yeah, there was 30 of them under the feeder when we walked up." And my camera went off. I'm like, "Man, I wish you'd have told me that." Well, on top of that, he starts me. He says, "This is where the deer was standing when I shot," which was right where all the hogs were. When in reality, he was actually 45 yards away where there were no hogs. We'd have had fresh.
There goes your finished test again, right?
Oh yeah, we worked it out. I mean, I came back and I said, "All right, climb back up in your stand and let's see where you were at." And he was about 45 yards off, and it made a world of difference because once we went over there and put the dogs on it, we went straight to the deer.
Yeah.
But again, he was wanting to. Oh, the deer went this way. I know the deer went this way. I heard it. I heard it go through the water. Yeah, this is the water right here. I heard it go through. I went the opposite direction. But we had. He was the type of person. He wasn't going to let me try what I wanted to do. So I was like, all right, in this instance, I'm like, I'm not going to argue with him. We'll do it his way. When we come up empty-handed, we'll do it my way. So that's what we did, and I had to get back at him. And I tracked for him a couple of times. I'm standing there, I look at my handheld. I said, "Oh, they got the deer." And I looked at him. I said, "Man, I said, this is how it goes sometimes. It's just not your day." I said, "I know you've been after this 10 point for 3 years, but this is the second time I came out here to track it. You might need to think about taking up another hobby." And I was just laying it to him. I said, "Well, let's go over here and see what the dogs are on." Walk over there, and he sees his deer. He jumped up, gave me a big hug. But I had to give it back to him because the time before that he shot this deer, I go out there and I put Otto on it, and Otto's trailing, and then he just sits down on my feet and looks up at me like, "What do you want me to do?" So I told him, I said, "Look, I I got my cur dog in the truck. She's proven. She's gonna tell us what went on. So I got her out. She started trailing. Got about the same point. She progressed it maybe a little bit more. I turned around, came back, jumped up on me, jumped up on the hunters. Like, no, this isn't happening. Well, he still had doubts. So I called Jason Beyer, and we went out there the next morning. And Jason, he was convinced that deer was hit, and that they were going to get that deer. And I already knew. I had zero doubts that my dogs were wrong. And Jason, I don't know if he might be on here listening. He's going to chime in if he is. He might have just been amped up, hoping he could find one behind me or something, because he was pushing and pushing and pushing. I'm like, hey, man, we ain't getting this deer. And I told him that beforehand. We didn't get the deer. He ended up killing it later in the season, and that's when I was giving him a hard time about it.
I think as a new tracker, that's honestly one of the tougher things for me is calling it and being worried about disappointing the hunter. It's the right thing. And I've heard several more experienced handlers now even giving advice on maybe tell the hunter the signs ahead of time. And I went on a track with you, and you told the hunter, hey, if she comes back and she jumps up on me, it's done. That means she can't stop that deer, or it's not going to die. And those tips, though, it's almost like taking people fishing, and the fish aren't biting, and you're like, man, should we move or should we stay, or what do you do? And of course you're a professional fishing captain, so you've kind of got that figured out. But again, that's that pressure. It's the same kind of pressure. You don't want to let people down.
Right.
So that's probably for me the toughest thing as a new tracker is telling them, hey, I don't think this thing's going to die. I know you got a little bit of blood here, and you think that's a lot, but it's really not. And I think your deer, you'll see it on camera again.
Oh, yeah. And just like fishing, because, that's what I do for a living also. And I tell people all the time, I'm the same way. I'm like, look, this is when the fish are likely going to bite. The fish are here, and they're not biting right now. I'm not going to leave fish to chase fish. The bite is going to turn on. If we leave, we may not get back to this spot because someone else is going to be here. And same thing with tracking. I'll see that same doubt, and then all of a sudden, bam, one cast after another. Fish, 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 fish. No different with tracking. You just got to be upfront and honest, and if they don't like it, it is what it is, but you're gonna prove it to them. And probably the biggest advice that I can give new trackers is build a relationship with your fellow trackers, and if you get that person that's not satisfied, just offer to pick up the phone and call someone else, or just don't even offer, just do it. Just pick up the phone and call someone. Hey, I'm out here. What do you think? You wanted to come try this? And that goes a long ways. Just like out there on the water, I'm having a slow day, and I know I'm where the fish are without a doubt. You're out there every day, every other day, and you're catching them. Sometimes just picking up the phone and calling another captain and say, hey, how's it going? Or sending a text, hey, you doing any good? And they said, no, man, we're struggling here. That eases the people's mind knowing that, hey, we're not the only ones out here struggling. Or I'll point out, hey, you see all these boats just constantly moving around? Yeah, they're not catching fish. They're leaving fish to go find fish. Well, we stay right here. We're going to get them. And kind of the same thing with tracking. Your dogs, people start doubting them. And I just had a talk with, I was talking with Brent Green from Louisiana last night. And, he was telling the story where, he got on a deer, and he knew without a doubt his dog was locked in. And I think it ended up being like a leg shot, but his dog was locked in and would not quit. And so he called up someone else and said, hey, can you mind coming out here and backing me up? I know this deer is going to die. Well, the person that he called ended up saying, hey, man, how do you know? Every time you call me, I seem to find these deer, and you hit the nail on the head. He knows his dog. His dog's telling him, hey, this deer is mortally wounded. He may not have been the right team, and he knew that, so he called in someone else. And that's, as you gain experience, that's what you do.
Sure.
But like you said, being up front, just like you went on that one by the Swanee River.
Yep.
Your dog was right. You doubted her, and then we got Dixie out. We got Dixie out, and what did she do? Went the same line.
Yep. Well, and actually that was one where you were talking about scent drift.
Yeah.
My dog was 15, 20 yards off, and we never found any blood. And the hunter was constantly in our ear talking about, "Oh, I think it was a miss. I hope it was a miss," because it was his father-in-law, I think, that shot it.
And he wanted that deer.
He wanted his chance, so of course he was willing it to be alive. But we put Dixie on it, and sure enough, she took us right down the blood trail. But if you looked at the two lines, they were 15, 20 yards apart and parallel the whole way.
Yeah, ended up in the same exact place. And in fact, we both screwed the dogs up.
So because we pushed them across the road.
Yeah, they came out in the woods, and both of them acted like they wanted to go across the road. They self-corrected, almost doubled back, and went dang near into where we came out of and veered off just a little bit. And we both thought, hey, they just lost it. Let's help them across the road. And we ended up wasting a lot of time because of that.
Yep.
And finally, I was like, hey, let's go back. Let's go back to where we came out of the road. And, they ended up going right in there and jumping the deer up. And, Dixie came back and she's like, she would still go. I bet she was trying to tell us.
Right.
And I told you, if you remember right, I said, hey, let's walk around this block because they ran through this block. Let's walk around and look and see what sign we'd see. Put back on, and we found a big piece, that long, big piece of leg bone.
Yep.
And then we trailed, and if you remember right, we started trailing right down the middle of this road for a few hundred yards. And you're like, I think my dog's leading us in the wrong direction. We need to come back and restart. I'm like, I don't know. I think they're on it. And ended up that deer went right down the middle of that road, crossed another road.
Yep.
And we got within 15 yards of that deer.
Yep.
And it got up and left, and we had to make a decision right then. What do we do?
Well, and he was very much alive, but Dixie told us that 400 yards earlier.
Oh yeah.
She came back and she jumped up on you. She did. She did everything you said she was going to do, and then 400 or 500 yards later, we saw that she was right.
And we probably one more push, we probably could have had that deer, but we were in a predicament where you got the Swanee River that was flooded and raging fast at the time, and a highway right here, and we were right in the corner. What do we do? Do we run it across the highway and take the risk of a car hitting the deer or a dog, or someone trying to swerve and miss and wreck, or does it go in the river and then we lose the deer, we lose the dog, something could happen.
Right.
And we made the decision, hey, we're backing out. Yeah, even then, the hunter was, I shouldn't say the hunter, the hunter's son-in-law, he, at that point, he was satisfied, and everything that I told him leading up to that, or we told him leading up to that, came to be true.
Yep.
And he was like, what, you guys do what you can do. I agree. We need to back out for safety reasons, and maybe the deer will make it, and it probably did.
Yeah.
But well, let me see if I missed any comments. Comments are kind of slow tonight. There's been a steady group viewing. So Joe Sellers, I did miss this comment, and said, I would like to see examples of the hit sites like blood color or bubbles, hair color, amount, and what the deer does after a shot. A lot of hunters don't have a clue where they hit it. Yeah, so Joe, we actually have cards. You can go on our website, and it shows the different colors of blood, the different types of hair, with the shades of black tip, white hair, length. It shows different colors of blood based on where the deer was hit. So that's a good tool. And we actually go over this stuff in a lot of our seminars. I know the last one we had in Fargo, Georgia, we put a lot of pictures. Did you make it to that one? Mm-hmm. I don't think you did. No. We put a lot of pictures up there, and actually one that we pretty much stumped everyone, but Ken Parker got it right. And I put one up there as one that I tracked, and there was some blood in the bubbles. I mean, bubbles in the blood, but it wasn't lung blood. Trying to remember what all. Oh, there was a little bit of grit, but it was just very small. I mean, just a very little bit of dark specks. And there were two little pieces of white hair. No, I'm sorry. There was a little bit of lung blood. over off of one leaf, but there was also big bubbles and some brighter red blood, and then there was little specks. Well, it was single lung, liver, and gut, and so everyone was stumped. I mean, because some people saw the lung blood, one person saw the specks, and then Ken Parker noticed the two pieces of white hair, and he hit the nail on the head.
I'm gonna poke my head out the back door. Somebody just pulled up there.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry.
Let's go back, see if I missed anything. Well, we've been doing a little more storytelling tonight. If you guys have any questions, we'll answer them to the best of our ability. He's going out back to see what's going on back there. The boys out there in the car. Yeah, I was just looking back. It looks like we covered most of the comments. Not really many questions tonight.
I've got one I'd like to ask you about.
Okay.
So I've been listening to a lot of the trackers and talking about different shots and different hits, and everybody thinks that if you've got lung blood, the deer is going to die. Lung blood. And I asked my wife the other day, because I got to thinking. I think it was when we were at our seminar, and I think you and Ralph were talking about it, and something to do with shots that hit one lung. And my wife's in the medical field, and I said, "Can somebody live with one lung?" And she's like, "Yeah, absolutely. They can."
Oh yeah.
And I get to thinking about it. I was like, "Well, these shots that are just barely they get that one lung, and people think, oh, it's definitely going to die." Well, what's your thoughts on those that only get one lung and then being recoverable? They still have a good lung. Yeah, it's going to draw them down, but
yeah.
What do you think?
I've tracked a bunch that were shot in one lung, and most of the time we don't get them, and they end up back on camera. They end up being killed later on. Or I've gotten some, but it's not. And those that I've gotten, that was a single lung that didn't hit anything else, like that was quartering hard away, and it was long out the brisket or something. Those were a Beyer catch situation, but even then, that success rate is pretty.
So
pretty
talking wait times. If you do have truly lung blood, depending on the shot, that may or may not be a definite recovery. Now, I saw the other night, I think it was Joey McDonald, when somebody was talking about different hits, and they said, well, if you got lung and you got gut, you probably got liver too. And I was thinking, I think it was Joey. I think you commented on that one too, I believe. But anyway, in that case, then liver's probably pretty good. And actually, you almost take the liver over one lung.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
Oh yeah. I'd rather have a liver shot. Honestly, I'm not promoting this, but I'd rather have a gut shot. I tell everyone, just hit it somewhere like 4 to 5 inches behind the shoulder to 4 or 5 inches in front of the ham, and we're good.
Let it lay plenty of time. I saw a high fence article out of some high fence place out of Texas. And they actually had an article about that, and they say, we're not promoting it. However, the recovery rates are actually very high on gut shots if you treat them properly, if you give them the proper wait time. And that's true. But, lung blood is my favorite, because I got to thinking about it. Even if somebody does have true lung blood, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's a dead deer.
Nope. And those are the ones that's hard to convince. So, you mentioned Texas. You mentioned, high fence in Texas and stuff. A comment came in right before you said that. It said, off the subject, but it still covers tracking. I've always been fascinated with Texas trackers and all the exotics they track. They jump back between whitetails and exotics, and some seem to never miss a beat. I know that is a blast to stay busy all year round. Do the exotics lay interdigital? I track a lot of exotics. I say a lot. I mean, I track Axis, black buck. Trying to think of, I can't remember those Asian elk. I forget what they're called. They're like a hairy. I tracked those. I've tracked I don't even know. I don't even know some of these exotics I track. But his question is, do exotics lay interdigital? Yes and no. The thing you have to remember with interdigital, it's not so much about the interdigital gland. It's what that interdigital gland is releasing, producing, and releasing, which is a chemical pheromone. And that's the key part. People get hung up on the interdigital gland when the important factor is the chemical pheromone, which bears release, elk release. Elk doesn't have an interdigital. Bears don't have an interdigital. Hogs release chemical pheromone. They don't have an interdigital. We don't have an interdigital gland, but we produce pheromones. We have a Jacobson's organ to, interpret and intake and interpret that chemical pheromone just like a dog. So that's the key part you need to focus on. Well, how does a bear release chemical pheromones? Through the pedal gland on their pads. Hogs is through the metatarsal gland and the salivary gland. Elk actually releases chemical pheromones through their metatarsal glands, their salivary glands, and their urine. So that's how these dogs that are, for the people that focus on interdigital, which I personally feel is very important aspect of training. And you've seen this already. You can see many different, when you start judging, you see how people train and the differences in how their dogs work versus other aspects like dragging hides and legs. And can a dog find a deer that way? Sure, you can train it that way, it can. But when you get to those tougher situations, it can make a difference. It will make a difference. So, London, that's the big thing, and that's how we're able. I mean, obviously, I didn't train my dogs to track elk. I didn't train my dogs to track antelope. I say that I do now. I mean, I have axis legs. I have antelope legs. I have elk. So I do train for that now, but I didn't. And the dogs, it didn't matter. I mean, I take them out there, and axis. If anyone's ever tracked an axis, they're tough. They can be tough to track because they're a herd animal. And what's the first thing they do? They get right back in the middle of that herd. And typically when I go to these high fences, I'm tracking an axis, and we go up there, and Ralph got to experience it because I called him in to back me up. Dixie was baying up this axis in a high fence, and it hooked her collar and ripped the tracking collar off, and it went into the water. We lost it. It was a brand new collar, first day I ever put it on her. And so I called Ralph to come out and help, and so we started tracking, and we got up to the herd, and there was that axis that was shot in the leg right in the middle of the herd. We could have actually finished off. We were trying to get permission. There was, anytime you had paying clients at a place like that, you got to get permission to dispatch it. We couldn't get a hold of them. They didn't keep up with us. We left them behind. But the dogs, like Camo, that was her first time ever tracking an exotic. And the dog was able to decipher through all those animals in this high fence pen, and those 30 or 40 axis and one herd was still able to track that single axis, because once they split, the majority of the herd left quicker than that one could, and it ended up going a different direction. You could watch the dogs work and didn't even pay attention. Those other 30 or 40 stayed right on that trail.
So we say interdigital gland, but what we're really talking about is a declining health pheromone.
Right.
That's really what we're doing. That's in the whitetail world. That's where it's excreted as the interdigital gland in their foot. I think you've even said it on the hair follicles, on their feet.
Yeah, that's actually where it's released, is through the hair follicles around the gland, around actually all sides of the leg, where that gland is at. It's the gland and the wax that I used to think you could extract, and I'll admit I was wrong, but there was more research that came out after that. But I think a lot of the people, and the reason why people focus on the interdigital so much is when John wrote his book, which is a great book. But there wasn't the studies back then that there is now. And now they've broke it down into different categories, like the alarms, the communication. I've got it all almost five categories they have it broken down into. And one of those is declining health, like you said. And that's really how we should be communicating this to hunters, the hunting community, and trackers. It's not the interdigital; it's the declining health pheromone, and that the chemical or the chemistry compound, I guess you'd say, within the interdigital gland is comprised of 46 compounds. Well, I can't pull it off the top of my head, but you can just imagine how many different mixtures you can make with 46 compounds.
Well, that's why every one probably smells different too.
Right.
So you put your deer you put your dog, if you can, confidently get your dog on the right one and communicate well with your dog and say, hey, this is the right one. The same way as, I guess, people, the dogs that track people, they give them a blanket or whatever and say, this is what we're finding. So the dog should be able to tell that individual deer, especially a more seasoned dog.
Well, it's like I tell everyone, all we are teaching is scent discrimination through our training. We want them to discriminate this scent from all the others. And as far as the interdigital or declining health pheromone training, I tell everyone, a dog just naturally can pick up on that and will pick up on that. I mean, you look at a coyote or any predator,
right?
They can seek out the weak, sure. The sick. Well, how are they doing that? Well, they're releasing a pheromone that's saying, hey, I'm sick. Well, the only thing we do through training when we focus on that is we just speed that process up. So someone that maybe only trained their dog dragging beef liver or hide or legs, can they find deer? Yes. Can their dog eventually put the whole picture together? Possibly. Right. And they normally do. It just takes a lot longer. We're seeing dogs that are 3 and 4 months old that are out there, recovering 50, 60, deer a year at a success rate of 50% plus, or even 60, 65%, here in the South where you're off lead. You didn't see that 20 years ago. You were in that 25% range. Well, what's changed? What's changed is the training, the education and the training of the dogs. So hopefully that answered your question, London. I know we got off pretty far, but I mean, I'd say that question was not off subject. I think it's a good question, and it helps when we're able to educate so that we can explain to people, hey, you've probably heard the interdigital gland's the fingerprint of the deer.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're saying it's not. It's just the declining health. So it does relate it to that one specific deer, but it's not because that one deer smells different through the interdigital. It may through other aspects. And I don't know if you had I don't know if you'd say the pleasure to track one yet or not, a yearling. You tracked a yearling yet?
No, not. No.
Whew. They don't give off the scent, and a young yearling is hard on a dog. And it's just natural, how they survive, especially one that they knock the spots off of. That's
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, and Axis is the same way. Axis does not give off near the scent that a whitetail does. So when you're tracking an Axis, it's a little tougher, and it's because of that. I mean, but you look at all the predators that they face in the wild; they've learned to adapt and survive.
Right.
So, I think that was a good question. Make sure I didn't miss any here? Yeah, we still got a lot of people watching across all the platforms. Just a kind of a more quiet night on the comments. So, how do you feel after your first year? Do you have any? You learn anything that you're going to work on for next season, or?
I mean, I learned a ton, and I think you got to work on all of it. But my biggest thing is constantly learning the signs and signals of my dog. I mean, you got to say it every single week, and everybody says read your dog, and we were talking about it earlier when we were talking about judging, but I think those details are the biggest thing. Running more mock tracks, and putting her in more situations where it's a controlled environment, so I know what's going on, and I can read the good and the bad. You've said it a bunch of times. Your dog getting off is just as important in a training scenario as your dog staying on the track.
Yeah.
Because if you don't ever know how to tell if your dog is off, then how are you going to know when to correct it, when not to correct it, what's going on a track? You could be 300-400 yards in, and the dog's just hunting.
And the other side of that is you talked about, a dog getting offline and you bringing it back, and it not wanting to work anymore. Well, why has it done that? You created that. If you always set a dog up for success, and you never allow it that opportunity to get off, and you have to correct it, and not only are you creating a problem there, you're also not building that team bond between the dog and the handler.
Right.
Where that dog knows, hey, they're helping me out. I need to come over here and regroup. And I think that's important. That's what a lot of people misses. And that's huge. And I've read it in books and magazines, and I see it all the time online especially some of these Facebook groups. I had to quit following some of these Facebook groups with these training advice, and some of the stuff that's out there is just off the wall. And I see it all the time. You never want to set the dog up for failure on a mock track. And every time I've learned not to open my mouth and say anything, because it turns into an argument on Facebook with keyboard warriors. But the reality is you need your dog to fail at some point in mock track. So like you said, you can learn how to read your dog. You can help your dog through that. It's like the scent gap on that finish test.
Mm-hmm.
That shows you if you and that dog has a bond.
Right.
You got to be able to know when that dog went into search mode. If that dog gets in trouble and can't get out of it, that dog needs to be willing to look at you and say, hey, I need some help. And, the two of you work through that. So I've had a lot of people say, well, why would you put a scent gap on the test line? Well, that's why. Let's see you and your dog work through this together.
Well, an example of that, I tested Jason Bell's dog Kit on a season test, and it was the craziest thing. I mean, she smoked the first half of the test, and she got to this one spot, and I still have no clue what happened at this one spot. There was nothing special about this spot, other than there was a mowed lane from a food plot back to a thicket, and all I can think of is some turkeys or deer or something had to have come through there in the time in between when we laid it and when we ran it. But she got to this one spot and she struggled and and Jason was just convinced that was the scent challenge. And he was just convinced, but he worked it, whether it's a scent challenge or not, he actually worked it the same way. And he said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to start making a little bit bigger circle, and we're going to make a little bit bigger circle until we get out from whatever this is that's going on. And I think it was on about his second or third, and he didn't do a full circle, but second or third kind of pass, getting a little bit further. And all of a sudden she hit the line again, and she took off, and she nailed the rest of the test through the scent challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, hit it track for track, stride for stride. But it was the same exact thing. It was the same handler. It was him noticing, hey, something's going on here. She's not right. I don't think it went 100 yards this way or that way. I'm going to keep her in a controlled environment, and we're going to work out until we find it. So whether it's a scent gap or anything like that, it was the same exact thing.
We have a spot where we train at, and you've been there, you've seen it. I don't know what it is about this one spot, but every dog, well, I should say the vast majority of dogs that we work through that spot, when they hit that, they struggle. It doesn't matter if it's rained. It doesn't matter if it's, everything's right. Every time the dog struggles through that spot. So we make sure we work them through that. And I can't figure out what it is about that spot, but it gets them every time. And if you find a spot like that when you're training, that's something good. Yeah. And like I said, I think we've had maybe a handful of dogs in the last, 8 or 10 years that has just blown right through that with no problems. But for the most part, every dog just hits it, and it's like they just where to go.
Yep.
And to even make it more challenging, we normally put a turn right there just after it.
Sure. Because it's a controlled environment. So you're setting your dog up not for failure, but for a correction to learn.
Right.
And going back to the parallels between all the different disciplines, when I was training retrievers, it was the same thing. You didn't just set up a setup just to set it up. Every single setup had at least one, and it was usually one. You don't want to get too many elements, but it had one element that you expected the dog to struggle or challenge so you could get one good positive correction to correct the dog.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with tracking and training, I guess training for tracking. You want to have those opportunities. I know when I'm working my dog on my property, I've got a couple feeders that run year round, and there's deer under them all day and all night. And when I lay a track, especially for not my young dogs, but one that should be able to handle it, I'm going right underneath that feeder and straight through.
Yeah.
Because how many times have you had to deal with that on a track?
Oh, a bunch. Especially you get into these plantations in South Georgia. Well, actually, right here, not far from you, some of these plantations, you'll get to a food plot, and there'll be 40, 50 deer in the food plot when they shoot one. And
we had a track this year, early bow season, before my dog had even been on a single reel track. I actually was bow hunting, and I was bow hunting for the purposes of shooting a deer. I actually texted you before I went.
Yeah.
I was bow hunting for the purposes of shooting a deer to put my dog on the track. And this was going to be her very first live track, and I was going to make a good shot. I've been bow hunting for a long time. Typically I've got pretty good control over the situation. Well, what I didn't realize is I hadn't bow hunted out of that particular shooting house, and it wasn't quite big enough for me to draw my bow back in, except for one angle. So now where I was expecting to shoot, I couldn't shoot there anymore. I was going to shoot this other spot. Anyway, I had to rush the shot because I knew the deer was just going to come straight through this little lane, and I knew there wasn't any reason for it to stop and the whole deal. I ended up gut shooting the deer. And I knew that I couldn't put on it right away. And now I've got this young dog who had never been on, she'd done plenty of mock tracks, but never been on a live track. And I got to give this deer the proper amount of time to die and the whole deal. So I wasn't confident to put her on it by herself. So I called Jason Beyer, and Jason came over. And the whole time we were waiting, I was getting pictures the whole entire time of deer on the camera, the whole time, for hours. And when we walked in there, as we're walking in, we're pushing deer out. And we're watching the deer. One of them actually just went about 40 yards over and just stood there and watched us when we were putting the dogs out. And we ended up struggling for a little while on it. And the reason why, though, was actually the deer had come in and drugged that scent from the wounded deer all over the place. It's the same as in our finish test when we put a dog on her, we grid search, because now we're picking that up with our feet and we're dragging that pheromone all over and making it difficult. And we had to restart the dogs, and after we restarted them the second time and got out of that immediate area, then of course DG hit the line and took off, and we found the deer and recovered, and not a problem. But it wasn't an easy track.
No. And Cassidy says, I have one guy I've tracked for a couple times, and every time I track at his stand, the dogs have a hard time starting from his feeder /hit site.
Yep.
And I went on one, and this was years ago. Actually, it was one of Zena's very first tracks, and the guy was hunting. It was peak of the. It wasn't peak of the rut. I'm sorry. The bucks had just started chasing. The does really weren't receptive, and anyways, he shoots the buck with his bow, and he said he knew he thought he just unzipped it, and so he was waiting, and he contacted me. He'd text me, and I'd never met him before. But he texted me, "Hey, can you come track a deer for me?" Actually, Randy Vick gave him my number, and next thing I know, he texted me. He said, "I just shot the deer again. Made a bad shot." So the deer came back by chasing the doe, and he saw the original wound was just a low graze, and was a little more than a graze, but it wouldn't have killed the deer. Well, then he intestine shot it, and we showed up there late that night. He had to do it that night, and I think every plantation worker there was there, and this guy happened to be a baseball coach, and man, we struggled. I had my bloodhound and Xena, and there were so many deer. I bet we saw over 100 deer that night, and it was a quail plantation. It had been blocked out and everything, and there was just deer everywhere. So we were trying to just kept resetting. Finally, I think it was the sixth reset. I mean, I just knew this deer was dead. The sixth reset, I seen Xena lock in on something. She was 6 months old, and that the bloodhound I had was awesome, and but he was struggling. And one of the guides, he looks at the guy and says, "Well, coach, you win some and you lose some. Looks like you might have lost this one." And I'm sitting here watching Xena; she's locked in, and I asked the guide, I said, "Hey, will you hold this bloodhound back?" And several times Xena tried to pick up on the same spot about 3 times when we reset, and I didn't trust her because she was 6 months old. And but experience, told me, "Hey, I got to figure out a way to make this work." They're already giving up. I know this deer is dead, and she's tried to go that way several times. So I asked him to hold the bloodhound back and let her go, and it was right then when he said, "Well, coach, you win some, you lose some. Looks like you lose this one." And my alpha beat showing treat. I said, "Well, coach, this one you didn't lose. Let's go get your deer." And he says, "What?" So we went over there. As we were walking up, there was a pack of coyotes coming over the hill right to us. I mean, sounding off, all the dogs' hair raised up. I mean, it could have been more perfect timing all the way around. But yeah, it was. But if you don't train for that and that kind of traffic and a grid search, I mean, they were out there grid searching before I got there, even though they
sure,
But well, it looks like comments are slowing down, or they've been slow all night. We'll give it a couple of minutes, see if anyone wants to get any last minute questions in. And if not, we'll wrap it up. But I appreciate you coming on, and Jason.
Hope Jason's feeling better.
Yeah, he needs to quit being so stubborn.
Listen to the doctors a little bit.
Before we go, though, we need to talk about some upcoming events. We got Alabama the first weekend in May, and we've got some good workshops planned at that one. There's going to be the seminar portion is going to be condensed. We're going to give out a lot of information in a more condensed format, but we're going to have more hands-on workshops. One of them is reading the dog. Mm-hmm. We're going to set up some scenarios where, you get to walk the dogs and watch them pick up on the trail and be able to read that head snap or, whatever indications they give, and let them follow that. And then we'll set it up where there's nothing at the end and they go into search mode where we can help people read their dog or help them to learn how to read the dogs when they get into those scenarios. Another workshop we talked about is setting up some of these challenges on the mock tracks. Like the spiral or a star pattern or scent gaps, and I think we planned on having you help do that workshop, and if you're able to be there, and that way people can go back home and start implementing this in their routines, but be able to work dogs on those challenges where they can see how a dog works it out. We saw a good one on Brant Green's UBT3 test last year in Alabama. They did a star pattern, and Brant, I mean, obviously he's very experienced. He's a good handler, but he knew it. And he's like, I know I'm about to mess this dog up, and I know the trail probably went that way, and his dog it was working that star track for track. It didn't cut it. So he was going out this way, back this way, over this way. And he just said, I'm going to trust the dog. And at one time, she got on it and she was lining out, and all of a sudden she came back and she went through that star pattern one more time. That stuff can challenge you. Mm-hmm. The dog knew what it was doing, but it make you question the dog as a handler. I mean, you've probably seen some of these tests with zigzags.
Sure.
People are like, what the heck's this dog doing? Or they'll think it's in search mode when really it's locked in, and we can be behind it, and we know. I mean, you see enough dogs, especially judging, where you know that dog's got it. And then we pretty much know, the more you judge, the more you test dogs, you pretty much know within the first 100 yards how that outcome's going to be. And just like I spoke with the judges that tested Trevor Foley on his UBT3 the other weekend, and we actually so JJ Scarborough and I we tested him on his UBT2, and he almost didn't make it. I mean, he was within feet of failing his UBT2. And so JJ and I we were talking about that before he ran his 3, and Chad Tate set up that 3, and that was a tough test. Yeah. I mean, they threw everything at him. Went through a graveyard, a live coyote, a live hog, a coon, a rattlesnake. Then they went through the fire pit area, and then they took the line right through where everyone was hanging out and walking, right through the pavilion on the concrete. Then there was and I know this wasn't set up, there was a piece of hide where they were playing with dogs and puppies hanging on the fence post right by where they're coming through. And, but every judge that was on that all told me the same thing. So we knew before he even got to that pavilion that he was past. He was passing with you. Even if he would have struggled right there, our decision was made. And you could tell. I mean, you know that now. I mean, you've had enough experience with it. You're like, all right, this dog's going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe I talked to him afterward. I talked to him the next day, and I'm pretty sure he told me, he said, I started to get nervous a little bit at the beginning, then I settled down, and I had a lot of fun with the whole track. He said the whole thing was a lot of fun, and that wasn't, just to clarify, that wasn't an ABTA test.
Right. It was a UBT, UBT3
test. He told me, he said, man, it was a lot of fun. And that's a good looking red bone he's got.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and JJ made the comment afterwards, because he was on that test, and he said, man, that dog and handler has came a long ways in a year. And Trevor puts in the work, and that's the thing. And that testing, that's where you see that, and you get feedback like that from someone like JJ. JJ is a true tracking legend. He's been around a long time. And for him to give someone feedback like that, I mean, that means a lot. Yeah. And Trevor may not even know who JJ is, but I've been around the tracking world a long time, and his name's been there 30 years. And let's see, do you run different dogs on the same mock track with different wait times? No. We lay different different lines for different dogs all the time. We may every now and then, if we have a dog like we run it and the dog just doesn't finish it out, or just we've had it where they get 50 yards in, or we're trying to progress a dog up and they struggle, we may back them out, put another dog on it, and finish it out. But we lay separate lines for each dog.
I'd imagine you don't want to encourage the dogs to track the other dogs.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. And create a Me Too dog. And
right.
We see that a lot with people that just try to train dogs by running a young dog with an older dog. Well, every dog needs to be trained separately. Billy Hodgson says, looking good, Travis Bozeman.
Thank you, sir.
So, yeah, I'm excited about Alabama, the North Mississippi. There's been a lot of people nervous. I'm getting feedback from Chuck and Brandy Darby. There's been a lot of people nervous about testing there. And, a lot of those people, they've never taken a test. There's nothing to be nervous about. Even if you don't pass, you're going to take something away from it. You're going to learn something. You're going to get some advice. I'll say this. I mean, what's $75 for good advice? I mean, that's nothing.
Well, and I don't know about all the judges. I think most of the judges are like me, but if we got to a point in one of our tests where we weren't going to pass, where maybe we've had multiple callbacks, or too much time's elapsed or whatever, I talked with the handler and say, okay, let's, we already knew they already knew they hadn't passed, or it was the third callback or whatever. But let's finish this track out and let's work it together.
Right.
Now maybe they're seeing a different. I'm not handling their dog, but I'm helping them, and maybe they're seeing something different in tools to handle their dog, or different advice. Whatever it is, let's work this track out together and let's finish so the dog sees success at the end. And maybe they've learned something, their dog learned something. Lyle Avis and I had a young dog that I think he had just not he one of his friends had just brought to you, and you had it at Stockton.
Yeah.
And of course you hadn't had any training on her yet. You had just gotten her, and she went and ran a track, and there was ran a test track, and there was a lot of people out there, and Lyle came back and he said, that's just not the dog I've seen before. I know she needs some stuff. I know she needs some work, but that's not what I've seen before. So we laid a second track for her, not necessarily to test, but I mean, we've got a whole group of dog people out there, and that's what we're there for. Why not? So I ran out, laid another track for her, and he and I went by ourselves, and he immediately saw the dog that he had seen before, and the two of us worked that track together, and he was stoked at the end just to have confirmation on what he thought was going on, and we both saw it and we both discussed it. So, and he's got tons and tons and tons of experience and lots of dogs and lots of handling. So any opportunity to be able to be in that community around the people, bouncing ideas off of each other, working together, it's, why not? Why not go out there and get that experience, get that feedback?
Yeah, we actually still have that dog, because I contacted the owner and I said, look, I still haven't been able to really nail it down what's going on with this dog. And we have since then, but I told him, I said, look, I can't let this dog go home. And the time, the quote unquote time had ran up for training. But I told him, I said, I can't let this dog go home right now. It's not ready. I would never let a dog leave like this. And we were able to determine what had happened. And I thought I had a pretty good idea of what went on. And after talking with the owner, what I thought was right. And it's taking us time to work through that. And he's like, hey, how much more do I owe you? I said, nothing. He's like, can I send you some dog food, something? I said, if you want to, but I'm not worried about it. I want to get your dog right. I don't care if it takes me another month. If you're willing to let it stay here, I'm not charging you anymore. I told you this is what the dog is going to be when it leaves, and that's where it's going to be, whatever I have to do. And we're about there now. It's about ready to go home probably within the next week or two. I can't.
Right.
And it's the same way when we're out there testing. I mean, I'm going to tell someone exactly how their dog is and how they can get to the next level.
Yep.
So don't be afraid of it. But first weekend in May, Alabama. The very next weekend, North Mississippi. First weekend in June, into May, March, end of May. First weekend of June. Might as well say June 1st will be the. Where's that at? Pennsylvania, Clearview, Pennsylvania. And then in September, the second weekend in September, we will be in Iowa. And we've already started on next year's schedule. We've got Panhandle of Florida. We're working on one in Central Florida. So there's been a request for Central Florida, Tennessee, West Virginia, and I'm sure we're going to be back in Georgia. Of course, Alabama, and probably, hopefully, Iowa again. So we're already kind of full schedule for next off season too. So, but Travis, I appreciate you joining me.
Yep.
Ralph was going to try to get back on tonight, but he's had a little setback. Physical therapist has been working on him pretty good, so he might be able to be back next week. And but we appreciate.
Just tell him to get ready for May.
Oh yeah, yeah. And he can't have a bug. He's got to run from spot to spot and help us out. That way, in the name of therapy.
That's right.
We do have a really cool giveaway, or not a giveaway, I guess. We had a donation, and I don't know what we're going to do with a raffle off, but that's going to be in Alabama. That it's. I can't wait to share it with everyone once he finishes. It's a pretty cool piece. I can't believe he's donating it, but so y'all sign up. We're probably getting close to a fairly high number of tests in Alabama. So if you want to test, don't miss out. Go ahead and sign up. Same thing in Mississippi. We want to see that area succeed. Maybe we can get some folks from Arkansas and come down and test. Missouri is really not that far from North Mississippi, especially the Ozarks is right there. So y'all help us spread the word, and we will see y'all next week.